But yeah, all that leads me to a question because I would say this book relies heavily on metaphor. So we've talked about how we're not actually getting descriptions, we're getting more metaphors for what's happening as we are reading through here. And it lead me to this question as like at when does metaphor become unclear and start to obscure meaning? So I guess I'm kind of getting to the limits of metaphor and
Are you
description.
talking about like an extended metaphor or just like the general like level of figuration that is happening throughout
I guess yeah, the level of figuration is a better
the
way.
amount?
But I just yeah, like they're not
Yeah,
actually
I
yeah.
it gets exhausting, I think is the answer.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When
Like
every
it
scene requires the reader to decipher this figuration.
well, because it's not just like reading, a long and winding sentence, right?
Right.
It's bringing in a lot of outside knowledge, like from very, different worlds, whether it be, literary or philosophical or, you know, visual art or talking about like the environment kind of shit, and like specific references to things that were going on in the environment or specific, whatever it is. Like there's all of this shit and it's so hard, like packed into these really tight spaces. I mean, and even, I don't think, I think it would be really hard to pin down, even like that first bit, right? Like you read it expecting that initial sort of letter to the reader, I guess, to be setting something up. And I don't know if it sets more up than there is a nothingness to life, and there is little difference between being alive and being dead.
Right.
Like, or, like, do you consider the gulf between the material and spiritual worlds only apparent?
Right.
Like, that's something that you expect in a poem, right? Like the appearance of only that way. The
Yeah.
gulf between the material and spiritual worlds only apparent. So there is a do you consider there to be an obvious difference between the material and spiritual worlds, is what she is asking here. The dead have certain obligations. Is one of them to remember us? Do you find that offensive? Which I thought was kind of funny and smart, actually. I like enjoyed this first one, like I said. Do you find the dead ridiculous? How about the dead finding the living ridiculous? Nothing we do is inevitable, but everything we do is irreversible. How do you propose to remember that in time? Which would you prefer to have your life compared to, wind or dust? Why? Sorry.
Right. I guess I'm a dust man myself.
Yeah, I don't fucking know.
But yeah, I think this novel, the reason I asked that question was just I think it was a good lesson for me in terms of the limits of figuration, where our own figuration can honestly do little more than obscure the meaning we're trying to go for.
Well, I think the problem here is that with like long form fiction, it's well, there's so little to anchor it. It feels like it's there because in some ways there's nothing happening, and it's like this constant telling you nothing is happening.
Right.
This is a story about the nothingness of life. And it's just yeah, I think it is certainly limited in a novel, especially when you don't have something to anchor it down. Like if you don't have a plot to work with. And I tend to prefer, and I think, is it is human and common and um the novels that sell the most copies are ones that are sensational and have action, and like whether or not the characters are all that deep, people talk about that, like how like character drives action or story or whatever you want to say. And like you can certainly make that argument, but to a certain extent, if you can't just follow at a basic level what the story is about, like, okay, we know it's about these three girls, but then we keep adding in new perspectives of new characters who may or may not have anything to do with these girls. In some cases they don't.
Yeah.
And we don't see much character arc in any one place, even with Alice.